In this episode of the Plant Pod, I talk with the skinny jean gardener, Lee Connelly. Lee is the UK's leading children's gardening educator, and he has dedicated his career to bring gardening to children. Lee's a presenter, podcaster, and author. He's the founder of the School Gardening Success Plan and the Skinny Jean Gardening Festival, the author of How to Get Kids Gardening. His award-winning Skinny Jean Gardener podcast was voted in the top 10 of the Sunday Times Gardening podcast. I urge everyone to go and download and listen to this fantastic podcast. Lee was the BBC Blue Peter Gardener for 4 years, from January 2014 to December 2017. Lee presents on BBC Teach and CBBC for children's schools and education. He has pushed the horticulture industry to the forefront and has spoken in the Houses of Parliament on the importance of bringing horticulture to the school curriculum. He has appeared on Channel 4's Sunday Brunch, ITV's Alan Titchmarsh Show, and Channel 5's The Gadget Show. He was also the ambassador for M&S in their Little Garden campaign. Lee is also a judge on the 2024 Jamie Oliver Good School Food Awards. As this podcast is being released on the 11th of March 2024, this actually coincides with Lee's birthday. So from me here at the Plant Pod, and I'm sure everyone else listening, Lee, happy birthday. I cannot thank Lee enough for giving up his time to come and chat with me. This is Season 2, Episode 2 of the Plant Pod. Let's get into it. Lee, thank you for joining us here on the Plant Pod. It's really appreciated, and thank you for your time.
No, thanks for having me. I'm well excited to be on this because we were saying before we started recording, I love your podcasts and interviews and stuff. And podcasting is such a great way to get the gardening message out there, isn't it? So
Definitely.
yeah, no, thanks for having me, mate.
I feel like the networking possibilities with it is endless.
Oh, massively, yeah, definitely. Like the conversations I've had off the back of podcasts, and I just love it as a way of communication. So yeah, thanks, mate.
And learning. I
And
find
look, yeah, that's one thing I love about it is because you can be doing something else. I spend a lot of time, unfortunately, now behind a computer screen, which when I got in this industry, I never thought I would. But being able to still be connected to gardening through audio is a great thing. So yeah.
It really is. I found when I was doing my soil science module on my crop technician course, I wasn't getting it, and I literally downloaded as many podcasts as I could on soil. And
Oh, that's brilliant.
Everyone thought I was listening to music, but I wasn't. I was listening to soil podcasts.
Yeah. They all thought you were listening to the top 50 and actually you were listening about soil. Yeah. Outside of the garden industry, that doesn't sound as cool, but
No,
I'm with you on it. I like it.
thank you. So, first question: how did you get started on your journey in horticulture?
Oh man, do you know what? I do love this question because a lot of people I speak to are always like, oh, my first memory of gardening was with my granddad or my dad out in the garden, and we were digging and with worms and seeds and all that sort of thing. Unfortunately, my beginning into gardening was when I was 26, and I never even had touched soil, or obviously I touched soil when I was outside playing football or whatever, but actually to play with seeds and get my hands messy in the soil and touch worms and all that sort of thing. It took me 26 years to get that point because we very much had a garden when I was younger that was look, but don't touch. And even now, when I go to my mum and dad's house, they're exactly the same. They have got a beautiful garden, but we're just not allowed to get involved in it. So I actually started gardening at 26 with my brother, and we started an allotment, and I had honestly the best time when I had my allotment. It was so good to just start learning something new and think about where vegetables and food that we eat comes from. Because I always say this sort of story, and people think it's just a story that I joke around with, but I honestly thought at 26 that potatoes grew on a tiny little tree outside. I had no idea how things were grown. And so starting that allotment with my brother was the beginning of something really special. And yeah, that was at 26 years old.
Can I ask why did you get the allotment? What made you get it?
Yeah, do you know, so one thing that happened around that time was I left my mum and dad's house to move in with my now wife. And me and my brother missed each other. That was the one thing. We're quite close. He's only about a year and a half younger than me. And we're quite tight at home. And yeah, we just missed each other. And it was one of those things which we wanted to find something which we both had no knowledge about. Have you got any brothers and sisters?
I've got one brother who's older,
How much older is he?
4 years.
Oh, okay. Do you get that competitive side between each other?
Yeah, on some things, I suppose we do.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons we got into gardening because none of us had any knowledge about it, so no one could be the one that got the edge over the other brother. That we didn't want to have like arguments and stuff. And it was actually because his vicar at the time. I'm not religious, but he goes to church every Sunday, and his vicar had a part of an allotment that he didn't really care about. And when we saw that allotment, I can understand why, because it was under trees and nothing was ever going to grow there. Um, but off the back of that, we got a proper allotment after that. But that was the start of something really special. And for us to spend time with each other, um, was the main driving force of that. But actually learning where our food comes from, as I said, was the special part really that sees me where I am today. So yeah, that was it really.
What was the first thing that you grew?
I loved chilies at the time. That was 10 years ago now. I used to eat chilies raw because I was a cool 20-year-old and I thought, chilies were great and my mouth could handle the heat back then, perhaps a bit more than it can now. But chilies were exciting for me, and that was probably the first thing that we really started to grow and get into. I'm sure it's different for him, my brother at the time, but yeah, chilies was a big one for me, and I loved it. It was a bit of a hobby at home, which I could then take down to the allotment and something to talk about. So yeah, that was a big one.
So it's all good family quality time together.
Yeah, and also another thing I loved was at the time we had we've still got a big friendship group that came down as well on Thursdays, and we used to have a couple of beers and get them digging and being part of it because we all know that having an allotment, if you've got an allotment, is actually quite a lot of work, right?
Definitely.
It's not a quick fix or anything, especially the way councils give and hand over allotments nowadays. They're usually a right mess, and ours was like one of the biggest mistakes we made was, and obviously now I know this and I talk about it all the time, was couch grass was everywhere in our or couch grass, or however you want to pronounce it, was everywhere on our allotment. And some old boy who was at the other end of the allotment, suggested we rotivated it into the soil,
Yeah.
and he even lent us his rotavator to do it. And so he stood there and watched us rotivate all this couch grass into, and don't get me wrong, the allotment looked amazing, but little did we know it was probably the worst thing we could have done because, oh my gosh, it spread everywhere. But hey, it's all a learning curve. That's what I love about gardening. Every moment, every time you plant a seed, every time you go out there and dig something up, it's a learning curve, isn't it?
Definitely. Do
So
you
yeah, I
think
loved it.
the guy that lent you the rotivator was just sitting back watching and laughing, like, look at these two novices?
Yeah, get 100% right because we had at the time we are, and I still am now, massively about bringing people together, community, and experience and stuff. And at the time we had a board. What did we call it? I can't remember what it was called, but it was like a whiteboard, um, where we asked people why we weren't down there because we were still young and we went down there probably once a week tops. So everyone missed us over the weekend, probably where a lot of people went. And so people thought we were never there doing stuff. And we're pretty sure on this whiteboard, we said, oh, can we ask for your tips and hints of what else we can do? And we're pretty sure he wrote on there, do more work. So he was out for us. He knew, and we always talk about him because he always stood on the other end of the allotment with his arms crossed, just staring at us whenever we were down there, watching what we were doing. But that's not always the way. There was other really great people down there. A guy called I hadn't talked about him for ages actually, but a guy called Alan. We call him Chemical Alan because he used to spray everything with chemicals, and I always joke that his shed burnt down and we never saw him again.
Really? Who burns it down though?
Wow, and I think over the years that story's very slowly changed Ross to me head and the burning down bit. You know how stories go, like he probably wasn't even that bad,
A
but
little
from
bit
being
gets added and added
yeah,
and added.
yeah, yeah, exactly. He's
So,
probably still down there going, "What's he talking about?"
do you still have the allotment, or did you give it up?
No, I don't. So what? So the progression of it was, so we had the vicar's allotment to begin with. We had that for about 3 months until we were on the allotment list, and amazingly, we got an allotment after 3 months, our own
Yeah.
personal allotment. We had that for a few years, and then we actually moved on to Jimmy's farm in Suffolk.
Okay.
So quite straight. It was like really early on in social media, especially for gardening, and we used it as a way to get information as well from people. And Jimmy Doherty, who is connected to Jamie Oliver and everything like that, he's had a farm up just up the road, half hour from us, and he said, "Oh, would you like to come along and just do an allotment on a space I've got?" And we're like, "Yeah, cool. That sounds like absolutely amazing." And we popped up there, and honestly, it was a cow paddock that was turned into an allotment, but then it got overgrown, and the weeds were ridiculous size. And he was like, "Here you go, do what you want." And we were like, "Amazing," because that gave us more connection with people that came to visit the farm, and again, bringing that community thing together. And also, we want to share that. We want to share that love of bringing everyone together and learning. And we had our allotment in Colchester, that allotment in Suffolk, and it was only a matter of time before one had to go, and unfortunately, it was the one in my hometown that we left behind, because it was just too much to do both of them, to be honest with you. And yeah, it was yeah, that's what happened. So and off the back of that, unfortunately, now I've not got an allotment at all because I'm quite lucky where I live that I've got quite a long garden,
Yeah.
and just because of time and work and what I'd get up to, it's easier to pop out into the back garden and grow myself stuff out there with my daughter.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a strange, isn't it? But it's beautiful how it started, and it's beautiful. I always say to people, if you're thinking about getting an allotment, do it 100%, but just know that it is going to take time and work to get it to a really good point that you want. Because we see all these amazing allotments on Instagram, they look beautiful, right? But the reality is that it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hours and hours to do it.
It's amazing though, don't get me wrong. Like it does take hours, and that's a beautiful thing to be part of. Like if you've only got a balcony or not even any space at home, I always suggest definitely try and get on an allotment list. Only because again, that allotment community is amazing.
Yeah, but leaving the allotment behind, was it upsetting after all of the work that you'd done?
Um, it was. I think at the time I was in a bit of a because we moved to Jimmy's farm. I was so involved in that, and we have started events and everything like that. And that's one of the reasons my actual local allotment had to go, is because we started to do Saturday events, bringing families together.
Yeah.
I was so like all in on that that the only thing I wanted to make sure I did was hand over the allotment locally in a better way than we got it. So we spent a good few weeks just sorting out the allotment that, let's be honest, at the time had got overgrown because we were so concentrated on something else. I just wanted to make sure that allotment was passed on to someone in a good way.
Yeah.
Um, so it just meant the only thing, the sad bit is that I lost that community locally, um, but obviously built a new community somewhere else. So
How do you go from getting your first allotment to working with Jimmy?
um, it was just luck. It was just literally luck from being spotted on social by him and him wanting. some volunteers basically to go up there and do stuff. And we were more than happy to do it because it was for us at the time not a career.
Yeah.
It was nothing that we thought was going to go into anything else. Um, and it was nice to be part of that farm community side of things and be obviously working with Jimmy and then later on with Jamie as well. And yeah, we had no plan of it being a job,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, and I like that side of it really because I think it would tarnish it a little bit if we were just thinking, oh, like let's just try and go and be famous. That would be good. What can we and that does happen sometimes. What can we pick that's easy? Gardening. Um, that wasn't really what we wanted to do. So yeah, being part of that farm life is good, and like being part of the festivals as well, and being able to Jimmy let us be pretty creative with whatever we wanted. So we had like nights there. We had a really amazing greenhouse, which we turned into like a disco, and we got people down, and we were just trying to we were labeled as like the cool, and this happens every year. Someone's new and cool to make gardening cool. We were the cool people of that year, and we tried to do what we can to make it different.
But it all paid off.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's definitely it's obviously from that point. So obviously we worked at Jimmy's, then we did some bits with Jamie, and then off the back of that we started doing bits for Blue Peter, and somehow become a Blue Peter. Like when I watched Blue Peter when I was a child, never did I think I'd then be on telly being the Blue Peter gardener,
Yeah.
and uh and that very point I was really shy. Like I was really I still couldn't like speak uh to people like a great around gardening and community, but at home I couldn't like answer the phone. I was like still really quite a shy person. I relied on my brother quite heavily at the time as well because he was quite outgoing and he was the one like he was a bit of the showman at the time. And now we've completely flipped roles and reversed that a little bit, um but yeah, it was it's weird how you sort of progress into that. Do you know what I mean? So when we
Yeah.
got into Blue Peter, that got me into like children's gardening and family gardening, and and that passion for children's gardening really come started to come through. So yeah, again, totally fell into it just through the Blue Peter stuff. As soon as my daughter was born, it all started to make sense. But yeah, that's how sort of how it goes.
I was going to ask about the BBC and the Blue Peter stuff because I used to watch Blue Peter as a kid. Every day you come home from school and watch it is absolutely fantastic. And to be able to call yourself and be their gardener, isn't
Yeah.
that an achievement in itself? And get the Blue Peter badge.
Oh, mate. Oh, do you know what? I lost the Blue Peter badge the other
Oh,
month. I couldn't find it. This was before Christmas. I lost it and I was gutted. Oh no, where's the badge gone? Luckily I found it again now. But for a while I was actually using using my daughter's badge. She's got a Blue Peter badge. I was like, well, I've got to go to an event. Can I borrow your badge? But I loved it so much. One of the things I loved about it was being able to see behind the scenes because we talk about allotments, and when I'm on stage talking to people, I'm like, if you ever want to start an allotment, become a TV allotmenteer. Because with Blue Peter, we started the Blue Peter allotment up there in Salford, and the best thing about it was that when we got up there, I thought, oh, this is going to be a lot of work this week. And actually, they put us up in a hotel. I come downstairs in the morning after me fry up, and there's a 20 men digging up this allotment for me. And literally, almost to the point where they dug a hole for the plant, I just had to pose with a plant and put it into the ground and tell people what it was. Don't get me wrong, we up design it and be part of it, but TV is such a massive there's so much going on behind the scenes um which don't get me wrong is amazing, but sometimes perhaps doesn't show people the real life gardening.
yeah. So when they
Yeah.
contact you, how does that conversation go?
Um, Basically, would you like to come be on Blue Peter? And we go, yeah, yes, please. That'd be great. At the time, I like I said, wasn't really into like the media side of stuff, so it just felt like a bit of a roller coaster at the time. It's like, oh, we're being asked to do this, we're doing other TV bits. This is fun. Maybe not realizing what the progression of that was going to be. But just being just I can just remember this feeling of just being overly excited every time we went up there to be
Yeah.
part of this amazing brand, which is Blue Peter. And
I mean,
you
it's been
know,
going for years.
it really has. And do you know what? I've not been part of it for, gosh, 4.5 years maybe now. And maybe even longer than that, maybe 5 years. And people still ask me about it, and people still and I don't. I've done so much in my career, um, that it feels sometimes I feel like I don't put enough emphasis on being part of it. Um, but you know, it definitely started that children's gardening thing for me, which I'll never regret.
Why did you leave? Was it mutual? Was it just there was too much going on with
Oh, I can't talk.
stuff?
I legally can't talk about it. It's quite a big scandal, mate.
Okay.
No, I'm only
Go
joking.
on.
I left. I tell you what, I wouldn't have left. I loved it so much. But TV is a fickle world, and as much as it's amazing and beautiful, we actually got replaced by at the time. How old was George? Um, Green-fingered George E was probably 11, 12, something like that. And yeah, they just wanted we were young in gardening world, I suppose, but he was, really good at presenting for that age.
Yeah.
And I think that having someone who can communicate with children, who is a child, is brilliant. So we got replaced basically by 11-year-old. But hey, like that's the way media and TV is. You've got to stay on it, and you know, like I said, it wasn't like our driving factor of what we were doing. We're just happy to be part of it, and that be part of my story is incredible. So
No,
yeah,
it really is. Honestly, it really is incredible to be able to say that you were the Blue Peter gardener.
yeah, and also and one thing I love about it was at the time I didn't have my daughter, so it was a real learning curve for me because you're part of this machine that is the BBC, and you're coming up with ideas for children. But you need to remember that at the time I wasn't a parent, and
Yeah.
nor was my brother. He was also part of it as well. We weren't parents, so we're putting out these ideas, which I now call Pinterest ideas, because they really look amazing and beautiful. But actually physically doing that with a 4-year-old or a child that's younger or even older is difficult. We were coming up with a wormery made out of a chest of drawers, for instance, as just one of the examples of what we did on one episode. It looked amazing, with perspex, like perfectly cut perspex stuff. Like, it looked great, right? And actually doing that as a project now I'm a parent. I realize that would never work because children would that project itself would probably take a couple of hours. The children, you'd lose them after 20 minutes with it.
Yeah.
So for me, as soon as I had my daughter Olive, I realized this sort of stuff would not work. So we changed up how I put out ideas and stuff. So as a learning curve, everything is a learning curve. That was really impactful.
So you are the UK's leading children's gardener,
Yeah.
without a doubt, hands down. Why are you so passionate about getting children into horticulture and gardening? And
Yeah, well, I think over the years, so I'm on my 11th year of doing this now, and like I said, when I first started, I was 26. I missed out on everything that um all gardening as a child I missed out on, and the only thing we had at our school was this dirty little pond which we used to do pond dipping sometimes, and that was it. And I always talk about it. So I actually went back to that school a couple of years ago, still got that pond, but I do a little bit more gardening, which is good. But over the years, I've seen um, how my own daughter firstly reacts to being a gardener, and and how we as father and daughter connect with each other. Like it's getting harder now. She's coming up to 8, 9 years old. Um, but those younger years of being together and being outside, like I'll hold with me forever, those memories. And that's one thing that I really try and push to any parent, that gardening can create real memories together. If I look back at the photos and the videos that we've done, it sometimes brings a tear to my eye because we love that moment in time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me as a father, I think that's super important as parents to connect with children. But within schools, I think that there's such a divide, right, about where one how people live. I feel ultra lucky to have a garden the size I've got. Um, I know that there's so many children that either have just a balcony or have a windowsill who do not feel that they could be gardeners or even grow anything. And that's why I think it's so important for schools to do it, because it's like the epicenter, right? The start of that child's growing journey. And outside of that, they probably wouldn't do anything. Um, and I think that's important for one, children's mental health. I think since 2020, obviously everything that happened, I think we still haven't totally seen the effects of what that has brought to children. Although we are actually starting to see, I'm a school governor, and we're starting to see in those early years how those years have affected kids. But so I think for mental health wise with children, it's really important. Also health, just in general, physical health is so important for children. So we can like have a healthier generation that know where their food comes from, is what I
Yeah.
always keep saying. Because if children know how to grow their food, know where it comes from, they're more likely to eat it. And if we look far, far in the future, we'll see the impact of that for a generation as well. So there's so many reasons that I'm passionate about it. And if I'm honest with you, since I did a tour in 2020 around schools, I got 10,000 children gardening in a week. This was before obviously everything kicked off that year. And I got to see schools that were doing amazing stuff and schools that weren't doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I saw how the kids reacted to it. And literally since that point, I've been just trying to pile all of my energy into schools and education to try and make a difference. And yeah, it's a massive passion of mine that I love.
Did you notice, obviously, touched on COVID there, that when the children went back after the pandemic, well, not after the pandemic, but when schools were reopened, and obviously the pandemic was still kind of going on, wasn't it? Did you notice the difference in the children's mental health?
I don't. I think the kids that were at school at the time obviously were affected, right? I think that is noticeable. I think the children that are more affected were the ones born during that time, which are now coming through into school, and you can see the behavioural differences with
Yeah.
them. Um, and that's where I think gardening can help a little bit. I also think the government needs to do more towards that in a separate side of things. Um, the children were in school at the time and had that lot of time out. Um, didn't come away unscathed, but I think going back into school, they're just so excited to be back and seeing
Mm.
friends and communicate with people. Um, so yeah, and gardening didn't really come back into schools until the last couple of years, I don't think, because the schools are just still trying to find their feet financially and just in general, to be honest with you. So yeah, so yes, it does vary.
That's the kind of, not excuse, but there is the excuse of the funds to do it, isn't there?
Yeah, it always comes down to funds. Now, I really struggle with this one because sometimes what it is the funds, they're trying to find funds for other stuff, just to run a school, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and gardening not necessarily because we can quite easily say, if you have to, you can garden for nothing at school. If we come back to what I talked about earlier on about community, if you bring together parents um to get materials and bits for a garden, you can set up something really easy and small to start that journey. I just think that for school, and I really concentrate on primary schools more than anything, that younger generation. I just think there's so much in schools that they're dealing with at the moment,
Yeah.
um, that they've not got enough money to even run the school itself. And so it really does come down a lot to a teacher that will volunteer their time, or a teacher assistant, or sometimes a parent. It's a thankless task at the end of the day,
There's a lot
unless
of
there's compassion.
Yeah, there's a lot of seed companies out there though, like Mr. Fothergill's, Unwins, Suttons, who will give seeds to schools for free.
Yeah, there's so many. Do you know what? If you're a school and you've got like a local seed company, or you've got a local any sort of horticultural gardening company around, right? If you, I know this is not 100%, but generally, if you speak to them, explain what you're doing, have a bit of a plan, which is always sometimes missing. Some people are just like, I just want a raised bed. What are you going to do with it? Like, explain what's going to happen to it and explain what's behind it. You probably could get a few bits or at least a discount on something like that. Um, I think that's great. I think the biggest problem we've got though is once people get that stuff, there's no guidance of what to do with it. So one thing I found, I gave loads of stuff out to schools before, like a massive package of loads of watering kits and growing stuff and soil and seeds. And the teachers or the schools that received them just didn't know what to do with them. And that was well, like a thing again, a learning curve for me. I was like, yeah, of course. Like, they're sitting up till 10, 11 o'clock at night, marking work and sorting out tomorrow's lesson plans. And then I'm expecting them to sit up and search the RHS website, which I don't know if you've looked on the RHS
Yeah.
website. It's a jungle out, literally a jungle to try and find information. And that is the biggest thing we're missing. We're missing that direction. We can give as much free seeds and soil to schools, but without that guidance for teachers to lead their class, it's pointless. It doesn't make any sense.
So do you think there needs to be something where we teach the teachers what needs to be done, but also the parents as well?
Yeah, well, I think for me, and there's a lot of people in children's gardening that may everyone's got their own direction of what they think, right? But for me personally, I believe that if you get teachers on board, give them the guidance, give them the materials, how they can add education to that lesson, then you're on for a winner. Now, for a few reasons is that if the teacher's leading it, that's going to be a weekly thing that the class is going to be part of. Brings the class together, brings the teacher and the class together, and that's a continuation throughout their early years through to year six, where there will be gardening. The problem is when you bring parents into the mix as volunteers or companies or charities, is that the school can't afford or always afford to keep them people coming in, right? And so that's when the adventure for them children stops, because that parent, and hey, look, I'm a parent of a primary school child, and I'm governor at the moment of that school. How much energy and passion I'll have for that school when she leaves, it's gonna naturally wane a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Um, Same with parents coming in and being part of the school. You know, um, I just don't think there's a continuation there for
Okay.
that. So I think if the teachers are leading it, there's going to be more of that keep happening, and that will keep the cogs turning within school and bring people together as well. I always hear about volunteers or companies going in to teach kids the gardening side of stuff and the teachers themselves going out of the classroom and going off to do some work somewhere. And then that just stops the conversation, right? It just says that you're doing this right now, I'm going to go do something else. And when I come back in, we'll continue with our day. And I think that's a missing link there. I think if we really get those teachers supported more than anything, then we can get gardening in schools and make it happen.
I definitely 100% agree with you. But also last year you, sorry, last year you was in the House of Lords
Yep. I
trying
don't
to
like
get
talking about it much.
horticulture onto the curriculum. How did that come about?
I almost missed the email to be honest with you. I got I um I got an email from the House of Lords saying, "Oh, we've emailed you a few times, but just to ask you again, will you come and give evidence for something that they were building up?" And if I'm totally honest with you, I had so much going on, I didn't actually know the Horticultural Sector Committee were even building up evidence to pass the government. So thank gosh I found this email that come through. And yeah, I was basically asked to come and talk about the school side of things and obviously children's garden as well. And it was a scary. I was quite scared actually to go there.
Yeah.
After I've done it, I'm like, oh, it was nothing. But out of all the things I've done, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to Parliament to put my actual views across. Um, and literally from that point, from doing that, I went in there and obviously gave my views, which we've talked about a little bit on here. And literally from that point, I thought, well, this is how we can really change things. It's one thing going to school and trying to change things there, but if we can go higher up and
Yeah.
get some real change from the top and let that trickle down, then we can make a big impact here. And so from that point of going to London last year, I've been non-stop trying to start conversations and make stuff happen. And we're slowly getting, this is a turbulent year for that sort of thing anyway, but we're continuing the conversations and going to try and make it happen. But hey, don't get me wrong, I was taking selfies wherever I could take a selfie in Parliament, being part of that. It was brilliant.
What about the letter to Rishi?
Yeah, the letter to Rishi is oh, I've been asked a few times about the letter to Rishi. So obviously off the back of it, of going to House of Lords, I thought, well, let's speak to Rishi about this, shall we? Still not got a reply yet from Rishi. I'm sure I've literally just got a reply. So I sent a few letters out. I sent a letter to the Prince and Princess of Wales, the King, but he's been busy, and and Rishi as well, right? So I literally come out of that Parliament. I thought, well, I'm going literally right to the top, to the point that even we'll speak to the King if we have to. And yeah, Rishi's not got back to me yet. I did get a reply from Prince William and Princess Kate the other
I did
day.
see that.
Yeah, you saw that. Yeah. I said to my wife, I'll probably be the only person ever to make a big thing about a rejection letter because they said they couldn't meet me. But I was like quite excited about getting a letter from them. But yeah, the biggest thing for me is just keeping the conversation going with it.
Yeah.
And off the back of last year of the Rishi letter and going into the House of Lords, it's just opened up avenues and connected me to people which I probably wouldn't have spoke to initially, even though I've been in this industry for 10 years. Going into that House of Lords has opened up so many different conversations for me that might not have happened before. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you frame that letter from Kensington Palace?
Oh, I already have. Of
Oh,
course I
brilliant.
have.
Even though it was a rejection,
The best rejection letter I've ever had.
that's what I was going to say, is it?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like I think I talked about it. I did a video on me receiving it, and even though it's a rejection letter, literally from doing that video about a rejection letter opened up communications with some more people that I wanted to speak to, which maybe haven't before. So it's exciting to be part
How
of
did you feel about recommendation 22?
that. Well, you know, you know how like someone says, how can I frame this in a good way? I didn't expect anything different, if I'm totally honest with you. All of the recommendations, I thought it was unfortunate that each and every single one, it was a bit defensive, the way it was answered. Um, and it's one of those things, right? Like at the end of the day, it's maybe not a headline thing for government currently to look good. It's easier for them to say we're just going to ban phones in schools. Not actually ban them, obviously, not legally do anything about it, but it's a good headline. One of the things I'm realizing as I dip my toe into this whole politics thing is that's what it's all about, right? It's all about um headlines.
Yeah,
And children's garden just wasn't a good for whoever's in charge at that time. Children and schools gardening just wasn't a good enough headline for them to move into. So yeah, it's one of those things. At the end of the day, if we look at a positive, and which I really am trying to be as positive as possible about all of this stuff, is it was mentioned within the recommendations and we got an answer on it. So at some point, someone's been asked about it, and who knows, in the future, that point of talking about school gardening could come up in a meeting somewhere or somewhere within Parliament, and they'll go, "Oh, remember that recommendation that was given to us?" The only thing I do think is a bit disappointing was there was a lot of recommendations, about 98 recommendations there, right? Every single one felt like it got knocked back. For me, just being part of school gardening, hey, that's fine. But for them people, them lords and lordesses, or I can't remember what they're called, baronesses, sorry, who spent that good year and a half building that up, I think it's sad that so much time, and let's be honest, a lot of money went into something which just become an excuse after excuse. But hey, it
do you
is what it
feel
is, eh?
do you feel that's all it is excuses from the government of no, we can't do this because of this, or we can't do this because the funds here. And
Yeah.
really, when you think about it, they have got the funds in order to do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can knock the government as much as we can as they've. It's a juggle, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I think if it was me, if maybe looking at that recommendation anyway, I personally wouldn't have wrote it the way it was written. I wouldn't have said let's put horticulture as um a separate lesson.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I wouldn't have wrote it like that. When I read it, I thought, well, maybe it's been written like that because if you go high in, then the only thing they can do is drop it a little bit low and say, oh, actually, we won't do that, but we will do this and just edge it into other lessons.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a hard one, in it. You just have to keep knocking on doors and keep going forwards. It's never going to be a quick thing to happen. And last year when I started this whole thing, I I spoke to my wife and she said, "How long are you going to be campaigning for this? How long are you going to be part of this story?" And I said, this could be tens, even 15 years down the road before we make any sort of impact.
Yeah.
It take a long time. And one thing that gardening has taught me and is very good at teaching children and anyone really is patience is the biggest thing we can learn from it. Like really easy to say to a child, grow radishes because they're really fast to grow, right? I don't know any children that love radishes.
Yeah. No, I
So
totally agree with you.
don't try and make gardening quick because it's never going to be quick and fast. And exactly the same with life. Like it's never quick and fast. When I first started this whole career into gardening, I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to be Monty Don within like 2 weeks of digging a well, I don't want to be Monty Don, but I wanted to take Monty Don's job at least 2 weeks after putting my spade in the soil. It's not going to happen. It's things take a lot of time to really make a difference.
It's perseverance, isn't it? And we never know, in 3 or 4 years' time, someone might come into the government with the same views and say, no, we need to get children into
Yeah.
gardening.
And it's only from having conversations with all these people that we can at least put that in their way, and that for them to go, oh, actually, that looks pretty good. Or that let's be honest, that will make me look good. That's what we really want. We want someone with an ego that will go, ah, that's a good idea, actually. Me helping children and get them growing. For me personally, I'm not a politician, but that makes a lot of sense if you want to be voted in. Uh, Help schools get a healthier generation. Perfect.
It's them headlines, isn't it, in the papers and on the news, and then they can take all the credit for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. Like, I don't want, honestly, don't want any credit for doing this. It might, if I can, a bit like having a Blue Peter badge, or I don't know, going to House of Lords. I'm well, or getting that letter that I've framed from Kensington Palace. I'm well happy with that. That'll do me. If I can, when I'm older, say to my grandkids, "Oh yeah, I was part of this whole campaign that actually got you gardening in school now. I was part of that whole conversation. That's enough for me. Like, I don't want any award. Don't get me wrong. If anyone wants to give me another award, I'll take it. But but for me, like, um, that's a big enough win if we can get it into schools. And yeah, I think we will do it, but it's just going to take a lot of time.
Eventually, it will get there.
Oh yeah, defo, yeah.
So, moving on from the government, the Skinny Jean Gardening Festival. You
Yeah.
was at Brig Garden Centre a couple of weeks back,
Yeah, I was,
launching
yeah.
it. How was that?
Yeah, it was good. It was really fun actually. So so what I do obviously is you know, people say when they look at my Instagram, it's all over the place because one minute I'm talking about government, the next minute I'm creating a festival in a garden centre or on stage in a spaceman outfit because my passion is to one, entertain kids and families and also inspire them.
Yeah.
And that festival we did at Brig Garden Centre, which hopefully will bring to more throughout the year, is doing exactly that. So it's something that I move around the country to festivals and garden centres, and it's basically a pop-up festival which brings family together. And one thing I loved about that was that I set it up, and we've got like sow and grow. We've got a little library area, which is amazing. I love that little library area. We've got like bug hotel making. We've got music by plants. We've got wow, sort of these little what do we call it, like hunts around the garden centre to win prizes. And what I loved about it was parents would come up and go, "Oh, go on, in you go and enjoy yourself." And I was like, "Well, actually, every child needs to be accompanied by an adult."
Yeah.
And writing that sounds really official, right, and boring, but there's actually a lot of meaning behind it because it's not just because I don't want to be a babysitter. Don't get me wrong, I'm well happy for kids to go and explore on themselves and get messy. And me just to watch over and make sure that there's no problems. But actually, behind that, every child needs to be accompanied by an adult, is is me making sure that those parents and kids connect and create memories together in that time they're in as part of the festival. And it worked so well. So last one we did at Brig was the first time we've done that size of a festival, a pop-up festival, and watching parents and children connect with each other and like getting their hands messy and coloring in and going on these hunts together was magical. I loved it so much, just being able to stand back and watch. Obviously, I welcomed them in and told them what everything was, but actually, their job was the ones to make the memories together. And
Yeah.
so I loved that. I loved it so much. And yeah, hopefully we'll do some more of it.
How important is it to get them partnerships with the garden centres, such as British Garden Centres, with how many, they've got 62 stores nationwide. It's
Yeah. Yeah, do you know what? For me, I've had in the past a real love-hate relationship with garden centers because sometimes I feel like they've not moved with the times. They are actually doing that a lot more. I mean, if you look at British garden centers themselves, are doing exactly that, coming into social media and everything in that sense, even having stuff that we do there as part of their bits for visitors and customers. But I think it's so important to connect families with their local garden centres because I think there's so much information from from the people that work at garden centres which you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
Like I even for me, I did a project recently. I went to a garden centre, I was looking at some plants and I was like, actually, excuse me, do you know anyone that can help me? Because I'm looking for some real drought tolerant plants. And she's like, yeah, sure, follow me. And she was like picking out all these plants, some of them that I've not actually personally seen before, right? And I was like, that's amazing. And I was like, I actually thanked her for her knowledge, right? And yeah, that's what you can't get from other places where you buy plants. I think that's a missing part. And I'm guilty of well, a good few years ago, maybe talking about garden centers and saying, "Oh, I don't think they're going to be a thing in the future, right? Like the internet is going to come along and take out garden centers." There's one thing you can't get, and I've changed my mind now about it. One thing you can't get from buying plants online, is that connection with people and knowledge which you
Yeah.
can get from a garden center. So I think it's really important to be able to bring families out, because garden centers not generally always in town. Um, you have to drive a little bit out to go to them, but bringing that connection also between schools as well, but between families and getting them outside of town and into garden centers and hands-on plants is really important for me. That's why I love doing it, and that's why I love doing that big one.
So how do you think it's going to grow, the festival? Will you want to do one each week, each month, or in the
Um,
holidays?
Yeah, for me personally, like it's just being able to do as as many as I possibly can amongst my schedule and get out there for me personally, like I said earlier on, like being behind a computer screen takes up a lot of my time at the moment
Yeah.
than I ever thought getting into this industry would because of the way I do media and everything else. So being able to do those festivals, it gives me a connection to parents and to children, which is really important for me to keep my toe in that because I get to hear their stories and how they are connected at home with gardening and what they want as well, which helps in everything else that I do and all my other businesses that I do around children's gardening and even speaking on podcasts like this, if I didn't have that connection, I wouldn't really know what's going on.
So earlier on as well, you mentioned when you was connected with Jimmy, you was also connected with Jamie Oliver.
Mm.
And you're doing the Good Food Awards with Jamie, aren't you? You're a judge on there.
Yeah, really exciting to be like. So I 8 years ago I was part of Jamie's Food Revolution, and that was to do with schools and gardening. And now this year I'm part of his Good School Food Awards,
Yeah.
which I wanted to be part of last year. I didn't manage to do it last year because we had other stuff going on. But this year, I'm super excited to be part of it because he is mainly all about food education, children eating and cooking food in schools and making that a super important thing that children eat well. And I obviously think that's a really important thing. And I want to see that growing side added to that. And so for me being part of it, is super important to what I do, and hopefully will be added to what they're doing as well. And at the end of the day, like that whole brand of Jamie Oliver is you know getting into a lot of places with their food education and how they communicate. And if I can do that with school gardening and add that to it, then all the better. So what we are doing is, on me personally, I'm concentrating more on the sustainability award
Yeah.
and how that school is growing what they're cooking up in the kitchen, literally from field to fork. And yeah, it's amazing to be part of it.
So are you going round to each different school that have applied for it?
That would be really cool, wouldn't it? I'd love to do
Yeah.
that. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Unfortunately, because of time restraints, it doesn't work like that. So what actually happens is, we had a really big what was it called? Like a launch event back in Feb, where we got the winners from last year together and all of us judges and experts as well. And we talked about what we wanted to see and chatted to Jamie about what we wanted to see from those awards and what we want to see from the schools. And then obviously it was launched and the schools now have to apply. And then what happens is those are broke down into um, the best of. And then off the back of that, that's where we visit them. So
Yeah.
say for sustainability, 1,000 schools go for it. That will be whittled down to the top 10, and
Yeah.
then we'll see what happens from there.
So what's an average day in the life of Lee? Because you're everywhere. So I've got some notes here just so I don't forget. So you're in the sun. You've got the Angling Water Services driveway makeover, the Skinny Jean Garden Festival, the Food Awards, the Garden Press event. You're literally everywhere. And that's not even including Parliament, and
Yeah.
you're a governor for a school.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I
What's
don't.
the average day?
Do you know what? You're the first person to ever ask me that. That's a really good question. There is and the simple answer is there isn't an average day. Like literally, I could be anywhere each week doing all sorts of things. Like one week I could be doing a theatre tour somewhere. Next I could be back in Parliament. Then I could be filming on the streets doing bits. It really does vary, and that's why I love doing what I do because it's not a normal. Like I used to be an electrician, and every day was the same, right? And sometimes that works for people, didn't it? And just for me, it didn't. Like I wasn't passionate about it, but doing what I do, I'm passionate about it every day getting up, I'm well happy to just dive into whatever it is. It's also about just saying yes to stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I've one thing that I used to be part-time. So when I first started, I was on Blue Peter and I'd be filming one day and have a massive team around me looking after me and saying how amazing I was and did my ego a lot of good. And then I'd come back to Colchester and I'd be connecting a caravan up with electric and giving it a test. And so it was a real juggle back then. And now, as soon as I went full time, which was seven years ago now, it opened me up to so much more things that I could do. And for me, if it's going to be a positive effect on children and gardening and parents and teachers, then I'm up for it. And it's one of those things which I think sometimes you don't realize if you have any. If I don't really think about, I want to have an impact, but I don't think about the impact necessarily of things that I'm doing. And then randomly, sometimes I'm not saying this happens all the time because it don't. Randomly, sometimes someone will come up to me and goes, "Oh, you went to my daughter's school, like she's not stopped talking about it since last year." Or, "Oh, you went to my school when we started a gardening club," and bits like that.
Yeah.
So you never know where that yes or what that yes will impact on other people, and that's why I love it. So there's no normal day for me, and that's why I love it so much. Do you know what I mean? That's why, and also it's given me so much more time to spend with my family and do family things. So yeah,
Are there days in the diary where you just do not book?
um, there should be, shouldn't
Yeah.
there? I don't book my daughter's birthday anymore. I used to when I first started my career. I used to be away every single time it was my daughter's birthday
Yeah.
for Gardeners World Live, and now I don't book it um, because I feel guilty that I used to do that and miss that time.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was important for my career at the time, but you lose stuff, didn't you? So I don't book days off. But at the same time, like for instance, my dad's been in and out of hospital. I get to be there for him when he needs me and stuff like that. So it is it's there's positives and negatives for being doing this thing, and the positives always outweigh the negatives.
You touched on Gardeners World Live there. How important for you are events like Gardeners World Live or recently the Garden Press event that was on?
Yeah, I'll tell you something, right, Ross. I used to do these events, and don't get me wrong, I used to love them, but I used to think, oh gosh, like I'm away from home, and I sort of miss my family, and is it worth it and stuff? And then when COVID come about, I I was like, I missed it. I didn't realize how heavily I relied on having that connection with people um outside of my little world at home. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So so yeah, going to the press event or going to Gardeners World Live and doing shows like that. Sometimes now, I'm not necessarily always booked for shows, but I'll meet up with people at these shows just to go to them and just connect with people and again, I could keep talking for what we've talked about, but community and friendships,
Yeah.
and that is something that gardening has really built for me personally. That without those sort of shows, I'd miss. And also it gives like a connection to audience and people that might come and watch your stuff on social, but you might not speak to them all the time. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I love it when people, 'cause I'm terrible, right, Ross? Like even if we spotted each other at a show, I have such terrible memory that I'd look at you for like 2 minutes and go, hey, and I would because on my mind just doesn't recognize faces.
Yeah.
When you go, oh, it's Ross, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Um, when people come up to me and talk to me, like, oh, well, I know you from social media. I was like, yeah, okay,
You're waiting for that little bit to so your brain ticks and
yeah.
oh
You're,
that's who you are.
you're so right because social is amazing for bringing people together. In fact, one of my best friends I met from social media. It's so funny actually. He's another podcaster actually. You might have heard of him from the Veg Grower podcast. You had the
Yeah,
Richard.
yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, yeah. So Richard and me, it's so funny that we met each other through social. So I actually did a competition on my show, my podcast show, about giving away free tickets to Gardeners World Live, and he actually won them. And we met each other at Gardeners World, and we've been like friends ever since. That was years ago, like 7 or 5, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we're like best mates now. And that's like why that's why they're important because friendships are born there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. You didn't know each other, you met each other, and now you're friends and stay in touch. It's, you know.
So good.
Um, I want to ask you about your business partner. So, I've heard a lot from him, and I don't know if every time I hear him, he's drunk or not. So, Arthur Shandy,
When you said about business partner, I was like, oh my God, what business partner have I got? Yeah, Arthur Shandy, yeah.
Arthur Shandy.
He is yeah, he's 68 years old now, Arthur. But he's probably and he's the you may not have heard of him, but back in his day he was quite a famous gardener
Yeah.
within horticulture. But yeah, he's someone at my podcast that really helps push it along, yeah.
I love your podcast, and I've got to say, no, I genuinely do. And I've got to say, every time I hear him come on, it brings a smile to my face.
Honestly, mate, I tell you what, so I love doing my podcast because it's really my outlet of creativity. Like I did at one point a couple of years ago because I was getting into the serious part of gardening. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I think it might have been last year actually. And I was getting into politics and everything like that. And I was like, right, I'm going to go serious now, and I'm going to do just normal talks. And the podcast has changed, and I did change it for a little bit. Just been really concentrating on school gardening, but that creative side of me was missing, right? And that's what I love about doing my podcast because I can just almost throw up all my creativity into it and just
Yeah.
mess around and try and get some fun and education amongst it as well, and and just outpour. maybe my passion of stuff. And Arthur Shandy, which is a character there, um,
Your business
is
partner.
my business partner. Yeah, is a big part of it. If you can ever find it, there is a podcast which I don't talk about anymore, but you probably like it. It's called The Lotment.
Yeah. The
So,
lot or
so it's called The, and then a little dash, and
yeah.
then Lotment.
Okay.
Search it up.
I
It's a
will.
little series that I did back in 2019, which some people keep asking me to re-bring it back up, but it's a really easy lesson, but that will give you more of an understanding of where Arthur came from.
Honestly, genuinely want to say I love your podcast. I really do.
Oh, thanks, man.
Started downloading it and listening to it when I'm at work, and like I say, listening to Arthur, it really brings a smile to my face. But also,
Oh,
you know,
jeez.
I
Oh,
found
cheers,
out
mate.
that you are really into water butts.
Yeah, I love a water butt, mate. I love a
Yeah.
water butt. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. So my mate Richard has got 20 odd water butts, which I think is excessive to be honest, yeah. But and he's always been saying, "I'll get a water butt, get a water butt," and then I got one this year. You'd think after 10 years I would have had a water butt on the go, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And now I'm like obsessed with them. I'm like, I need more.
How many have you got now?
And I've
Have
only
you?
got two at the moment.
Because I was listening to the podcast and I think you was putting one in the front garden for the
Yeah, I've got
driveway,
one.
and there you go, you've done it.
Yeah, it's in the front. It's the best thing I've ever done. It's gonna honestly, it's gonna come in the summer more than anything. At the moment, it's good. Don't get me wrong. But in the summer, when so what happens is I had a driveway to give everyone a little bit of backstory. Had a driveway, block paved the driveway. Hated it ever since I did it. I've always wanted to dig it up and put plants in it. Finally did that. Dug up the driveway. We can still fit as many cars at the front, so that's good. But one thing that's always happened is the plants never get watered out the front.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to spend loads of money on this driveway and then all the plants to die as much as they were meant to be drought tolerant. It gets so wet out the front. So at the moment, what are we in? We're in March. So it's not such a problem at the moment. We're getting plenty of rain. I know come August that water butt is going to come into its own because even when I'm away for like a week or sometimes 2 weeks working, my wife and daughter can get out there easily without having to get a hose pipe
Yeah.
or anything like that.
What's your advice for anyone who wants to get into the industry?
Don't. No, I'm joking. Into the industry itself.
Yeah, into gardening, into horticulture. If what's the advice from you being a person at the forefront of it?
Thanks, mate. Just start. I think is the biggest thing. Just get some seeds, pop them into a pot, put them on the windowsill, and watch that plant grow. Or put a bulb. I mean, I used to hate daffodil bulbs and tulip bulbs. I used to think they were rubbish, right? Yeah. And as soon as I started putting them in the soil, I was like, this is amazing. Like watching this green shoot very slowly pop out and an actual flower come from it. I was like, I always talk about gardening being like magic, like being a magician, right? And as soon as you grow that first thing, I think you'll be hooked. It's just starting. It is the biggest thing. And if you can start in the smallest way possible, just on the windowsill or just outside your back door, then you honestly that adventure will start. Getting into the industry itself, I think again, just starting to grow stuff and speaking to people about the different avenues you can go down. You know, I've gone very media centric of what I do and very children's gardening, school gardening, but there is so many, and I learn about different avenues and different areas of our industry every single day from speaking to people that place or parts of the industry I never even knew existed. And and unless you unless you get into it and just start anywhere, you won't learn about them because you won't be talking about it. As soon as you even just maybe just start working at a garden centre, you'll start finding out about all the different areas because you're constantly talking about gardening.
Yeah.
Um, The only time I don't really talk about gardening is when I'm down the pub with my mates because they are bored, sick of hearing about it.
Yeah.
So
And
be around people, basically. Be around people that have that passion as well.
what does the future hold for Lee Connelly?
That's a really big question, isn't it? Um, the future holds for me, hopefully a lottery win would be really good.
Definitely.
Um, I think for me, look, I've I've done 10 years now, 11 years in this industry, and at the very start, I never knew or I didn't have a plan of where I was going. And I feel like I've come, if I have to blow my own trumpet, which is not hard sometimes, I'll be honest with you. I've come quite far in those 10 years. Now I've got an actual focus on how I really want to impact the industry. I think the next 10 years is going to be big. I mean, I don't want to be over positive about it, but I think I've got such a focus on where I want to go, and I've got a little bit of a name within children's gardening now, so that can only help. Um, I think the biggest thing for me in the next, let's say, 10 years is to get that curriculum gardening happening.
Yeah.
And that'll be a win for me, if I'm honest with you. I'll retire. Well, I won't retire, um, but I'll be happy. I'll be so happy to do that.
I think that's absolutely great. I really do. And I see that you've got that tunnel vision on it.
Yeah, mate. I'll tell you another thing also is, on the side of that is to also spend time with my daughter as well. Because
Yeah.
you can really have that tunnel vision. I've been there before with other stuff and forget all the other bits going around you. And kids grow up fast, man. Like it's nuts that she's going to be 9 in June. It's scary to me that she was like I wrote a book once, and we look at it sometimes when she was 4 years old was when I wrote the book, and I look at her now and I'm like, wow, like time flies. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's remembering that as well at the same time. But yeah, I think we can do a lot over the next couple of years. And I think there's so much going on within government, going back to that a little bit, that I really think now is the time to make an impact. And I'm really happy to be out there having them conversations.
Good. If there's anything I can do to help out, I'm always there as well.
Mate, 100%. Mate, you're already doing enough just having me on today, being able to talk about it. So, do you know what I mean?
Honestly, it's my pleasure. But I have got one more question.
Yes.
So for season two, what I want to do is I want to ask everyone the same question and see what their answers are.
Oh God. Okay. Yeah.
So there's a colony on Mars.
Yeah.
Lee, we are sending you to Mars. You can
Yeah.
take one flower, one
Oh,
vegetable, and one fruit. What do you
God.
take?
Well, obviously strawberries. That's
Yeah.
straight out, straight in. Because I couldn't live without strawberries, if I'm honest with you. Um, one vegetable. Oh man. Well, I have to say chilies, wouldn't I? I mean, I can't not say chilies. That would have to be up there because let's
It
be
was
honest. Go on.
the first crop, wasn't it? So
Well, yeah, exactly. And also, I can imagine initially it's going to be the food's going to be pretty bland, isn't it? So
yeah,
bring some spice to it. As flowers, oh my gosh. God, you've got me on flowers because I'm not a flower guy, Ross. But um, hey, we want to be positive while we're up there, right? We want to be happy.
yeah.
So I want to very slowly watch that tulip grow out of the sand up there. The tulips. Let's have a field of tulips so we can all get some happiness and positivity from it. But that is a
Brilliant.
good question, honestly. I honestly love space and thinking about how things would grow on Mars. I talk about it in my show.
Lee, thank you. Honestly, you've been amazing.
No, mate, honestly, thanks for having me on. And yeah, hopefully hopefully in like 10 years' time, we can like have another podcast where we can come back and go, oh, look where we've come.
I'd hope to think before 10 years.
Yeah, you're gonna have to start. Like, I'll do I have one episode for free, mate, and after that, It gets very expensive.
I spoke to Arthur and he said I could have them all for free.
Yeah, I knew I shouldn't have made him my business partner. Mate, honestly, thanks so much for having me. And
No, thank you.
yeah, I love it.
It's been amazing. Well, that was episode 2. I can say I really enjoyed chatting to Lee on this, and I hope to do it again and catch up in the future. I wish Lee nothing but the best, and I look forward to what the future holds for him. Please go and listen to Lee's podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from. Just search Skinny Jean Gardener. You will not be disappointed. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye bye.